So in the waiting room, we have the fire chief, emergency management chief, chief administrative officer, Kayla Wallace, who I believe is also with emergency management, and Tyja Anderson from the mayor's office. So when you get started, I'll be ready to let them in.
All right, we're gonna let in, Rick Fontana, Scott Jackson, Kayla. Kayla does the grants. Fire chief, Rick Fontana. Yeah.
Again, the webinar format, Mick, there's no waiting room. They're just attendees right now, so they're
Right.
already in the meeting.
Really?
Yep.
Hmm.
Cool.
They just can't speak yet until they're promoted.
Well, okay. Well, I guess what I meant then is when you're ready, I'll promote them.
We can do promotions here. We can't. So it's not. We can't see them until you promote them up, right?
You know, you want me to wait till after you call to order?
Yes, I think I need one more body. Only 3 committee members.
hmm.
You could start with me, Mr. Antunes, if you like.
Well, I would just want to be sure that everybody gets the full context because these are a little bit confusing. There we go. We got all the Wingate.
Yeah, I'm here.
So nice to see you.
It's public safety, isn't it?
No, this is the movement to get Pepe's moved to downtown.
Or we move to 1500 El Grasso.
No.
I take Pepe's. Come on, man.
Okay, we got Alder Crespo coming online.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Hi, Abby.
Hello.
Right. We have a quorum, so we will get started. We'll call the meeting to order. Alder Singh. And I'll read the notice. The Public Safety Committee of the New Haven Board of Alders will hold a public hearing. Oh, I have to turn myself on too here. There I am. On Tuesday, September 15th at 6 p.m. to hear and act on the following legislative item via video conferencing at https://bit.ly/32G1VBU or by telephone dial 888-475-4499 and enter webinar ID 947-4372-7324. For required password, contact publictestimony@newhavenct.gov. The 3 items on the agenda tonight are LM 2020-0355. It's a resolution of the Board of Alders of the City of New Haven authorizing the mayor of the City of New Haven to submit an application to Federal Emergency Management Assistance to Firefighters Grant to purchase 166 self-contained breathing apparatus, SCBA, units, an air compressor, a cascade, and a fill station for the federal funding of $1,423,175.45 and to accept such funds if offered and to execute all documents and contracts as necessary. Item 2 is LM 2020-0356. Resolution of the Board of Alders of the City of New Haven authorizing the mayor to submit an application and to accept the award if offered to the FEMA Port Security Grant Program in the amount of $316,000 of federal funds. And the third item is LM 2020-0354. A resolution of the Board of Alders of the City of New Haven authorizing the mayor of the City of New Haven to submit an application to the Federal Emergency Management Agency Assistance to firefighters grant supplemental to reimburse the city for purchases of protective coveralls, respirators, eye protection, and gloves for federal funding of $164,873.09, and to accept such funds if offered, and to execute all documents and contracts as necessary. These items are on file and available in the office of the city clerk, 200 Orange Street, room 202, New Haven, per order of Honorable Gerald M. Antunes, Chair. Attest Honorable Michael Smart, City Clerk. For accessibility-related requests, please contact 203-946-7833 for voice, or 203-946-8582 TTY prior to the meeting. The public can view the meeting at https://bit.ly/32G1VBU, or by telephone dial 888-475-4499 and enter webinar ID 947-4372-7324. For required password, contact public testimony@newhavenct.gov. Ooh. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Committee members, we'll go around the table, around the screen, according to the list of members. For introductions, we'll start with my vice chair.
Alderman Brian Wingate, Ward 29, Beaver Hills.
Alder Crespo.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Alder Jose Crespo, Ward 16, New Haven.
Alder Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Abby Roth, Ward 7.
Alder Haywood. Not here. Alder Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alder Singh, Ward 5. Thank you.
And Alder Smith.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Alder Smith, Ward 30, West Hills.
And I am the chair, Alder Gerald Antunes from Ward 12, Quinnipiac Meadows. All right, we're going to get started with the first item. I don't see any other visiting alders. Oh, yes, Alder Sal DeCola has joined us. Thank you, Alder, our third officer. All right, we'll start with the first item. And if you could, members of the city staff who are coming to testify, before you testify, give your name and address for our record, please. The floor is yours. We'll start with Mr. Jackson.
Good evening, friends. Scott Jackson, 72 Front Street, New Haven, Connecticut. Item number one is a grant application for $1.4 million. This is the same grant that was announced last week by Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro and other members of the city staff. It was originally presented to the board in July, but sometimes the federal grants go fast and sometimes they go slow. And so this one came out quickly. It's originally the application was for 1.4 million. We received an amount of a little over 90,000. The reasoning being that there was a reduction in the number of units, and I'll turn it over to Rick Fontana to give the specifics of that.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Appreciate you giving us the opportunity to present the information regarding such a large grant to the city of New Haven.
Name and address first, please.
Sure. Rick Fontana, Director of Emergency Operations, 200 Orange Street, New Haven, Connecticut.
Okay.
Again, this is one of the largest grants that we have received in many years, dating back to the $1.3 million for the Marine One fireboat, which was $1.3 million in 2012. This was actually one of the largest grants in the state of Connecticut, the second largest, and it was the first for operations and safety. As you know, these grants, and you've heard from so many folks how competitive they are. The unfortunate thing here is that these grants do not provide a lot of time. And once the funding, the notice of funding opportunity is received by the city, it then provides usually a 30-day window to actually write the grant and submit the grant. This was during the middle of COVID, and you know, again, we still have not yet formally or officially we have not yet accepted this grant. It is in the project amount, as Mr. Jackson said, it was initially 1.4 million. It was reduced to 920,000. And the reason for that was we had put in for 166 self-contained breathing apparatus. Those are what firefighters wear. It's really clean, compressed air that firefighters wear while fighting fires. But what we had done is we actually put in more than we need. It's based on riding positions. And although we have 72 personnel on duty on a normal day, the number we put in is for riding positions. And I have learned, as I have witnessed some of these grants being submitted and have had the opportunity to review some of them, we always put in for 95 units because those were our seated positions. And I had noticed some other departments that were using numbers that were a little bit more elevated. And so what we found out is using just take, for example, a battalion chief's car. And although it has 4 seats in it, we only would always take 1 unit for that. So when we found out we can actually count that as 4, we did that. We were reduced, but we were reduced down to 109 self-contained breathing apparatus units. The units that are being used now by the fire department are 10 years old. They are in a major urban, almost metropolitan fire department. They get a lot of work. They were becoming very expensive to continue repairing. There were 2 NFPA changes in regulations, and also the fact that they're 10 years old allowed us to put in for this grant. Along with the grant comes a new filling station. I will tell you, this filling station that is currently at the New Haven Fire Training Academy is 30 years old, and it is time for new equipment. These firefighters deserve nothing but the best to protect their respiratory system, and without this grant, it would be on the backs of the city, because it's not that we're getting something that we don't need. We're getting something that is at the units that we're using are at end of life. The amount of the award, the project is $920,400. The award, which is 90% of that, is $836,727. It is a large amount. It is so desperately needed, and without this, we would be footing that bill through numerous years of putting in. You'd never be able to do it 1 year at a time. You'd have to do 20 or 25 per year to get to the number that are needed. So I think that those are the important facts, and I'm glad to turn it over to anyone else that would like to say some words or take any questions.
If you could, just before we move it on, I'll ask any of the presenters, since some of the public is watching this, if you have any acronyms or initials that are used for different things, if you could spell them out so that the general public would know, like the NFPA.
Sure. I was going to actually pass. Rick Fontana must have read all of my notes tonight. I have nothing else to add other than, as a person who's worn these packs for 35 years, I used to wear an old steel tank with a chest respirator and a 5-point mask. Very cumbersome. They weren't designed for people of my stature, if you will. So the tanks were so large that if I looked up at the top of the building, the back of my helmet would hit the tank and it would knock my helmet off. These tanks have come a long way. They are now of carbon fiber. They, at one point, they were aluminum with spun fiberglass, but now they are carbon fiber. When Rick so eloquently put that the standard had changed, not only were we at the end of the life cycle, but we were in between changes that the NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Association, they are a consensus standard body. They develop the best practices for code, operations, equipment, you name it. There is a reference NFPA. If you don't even know the numbers, which I had to learn to become a chief, you don't know the numbers, you can just type NFPA apparatus and it will come up with the codes and standards. And so we were at a crossroads between not only at the end of life or life cycle for the packs that we have, but the standard was still being developed. And so many of the vendors were not willing to sell even what they had on the shelf for fear of us coming back in a year and saying the standard changed. One of the principal standard changes is when the bottle was filled, on average, you would get 20, depending on your physical consumption and the workload that you placed yourself under, you would manage your air. And so we have an alarm system that's built into it that the old standard was 25%. When it got to 25% reserve left in the bottle, your mask would vibrate and would make a tone sound, a bell sound, to tell you to get out of the building. What they were finding was that the NFPA standard has now increased to 33%, a third of the bottle. And so what's happening is firefighters are coming out of the building earlier. And so working with the NFPA, other organizations, larger organizations that were testing prototypes, we are at the point where the standard has been now released. If we did not get this grant, the city of New Haven would have to buy these packs. We would be into easily $1 million in buying these packs. So I'm very grateful to give a shout out to Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, who not only championed this cause for us, but during COVID, trying to make these applications, we were afraid we weren't going to make the deadline because we were so busy ramping up for COVID that her office was an advocate for us to even get the grant application extended. So we want to give her her due, because it not only helped New Haven, it helped fire departments all over the country. The Aid to Firefighter Grants, AFG grants, are there to assist fire departments in getting particular equipment, whether it be apparatus. Lots of times it's not operational. It's not something that you can actually take to the street and wear and use. This is critical life-saving air. We don't carry oxygen, we carry compressed air, which has to be cleaned. So Rick talked about our compressor being old. Yes, it still works. If anyone's a auto mechanic or anyone who's worked with air compressors before, you maintain them, they'll last for a lifetime. But now that we're changing the standard of the bottle, we have to change the compressor as well. And I also want to thank my committee members, the safety committee members, and Local 825 for assisting in doing the research and making sure that we place the information in that application to make it successful. Now, one thing that I did not hear that needs to be covered as well with the riding positions, and Rick, please don't ever give away our secrets on how we make our calculations. We go to the federal government and ask for money. We do the best job that we can. Okay. And ensuring that we have adequate equipment, safety equipment for our folks. So with the match, there is a subtraction, even though we are being awarded or offered $920,000, you have to subtract 10% from that, which comes out to roughly $836,000. There's a 10% match, which the city has to come up with. What I'll be coming back to the alders for, should we prevail in this, the 10% grant, 10% match for the grant will, I will ask if we can do a transfer out of my capital funds from apparatus to cover that. As I've come to you before, and I've come to the finance committee before, we purchased 3 fire engines this year. We anticipate taking delivery on 2 of them in the next 2 weeks. We're going to inspect them this week. The third will be completed within 6 months. Again, With COVID, we're dealing with some of these manufacturers. However, I've been saving our money while we've been maintaining our apparatus. And so out of that fund, once we pay for the 3 pumpers, there will be sufficient funds left in that capital fund so as not to increase the budget any. I'll just come back to you and ask, can we transfer that money? And basically what that does, that match we can spend on other equipment. And so what that will do is will offset some of the expenditures I'll have on another item. So that is the only impact to us, is I'll be coming back and asking for a transfer of roughly $83,673, which I will pull from an apparatus account, with your permission, obviously. That's all I have to add. If anyone else is willing to, and thank you, Kayla Wallace. Tremendous work. Tremendous work. Yeah. That's all I have, sir.
That all for the testimony. Let's open any questions of the committee. Anyone from the committee have questions? Alder Roth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all. And I just feel, since this is a fire issue, first, I feel like we should acknowledge what's happening in the West. And I'm very grateful to the fire profession. It's really scary. And what you do is really scary. So not what you do, but what you are, you know what I mean? Yeah, so that's a lot on my mind and so many people's mind, I know. But I just have a few questions. I guess first, go just to make sure I understand what you were saying about the transfer, Chief Alston. If you were saying it would transfer within the capital budget or somehow transfer from the capital budget to the operational budget, to the general budget.
It would stay within capital.
Okay. That's I just had wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. Thank you. And I guess my second question, I'm just curious sort of how many of these units we currently have, and if the amount we're getting, and you may have said this in your explanation, I just missed it, if we are getting enough to replace all our current stock.
Yes, we are. Yeah. So when we count riding positions, basically when we count, our minimum staffing for fire suppression is 72 bodies. And so each of them are assigned throughout the city. The riding positions come out to roughly about 95 to 100 because you have to count me. I'm not going in to fight a fire, but if I had to, I have to have a pack in my car. If I press anyone else into service, or if I have folks that are already working, and then I call people in for a second or a third alarm, or and I have to supplement them or put them to work, we need to have that tactical reserve as well. But in terms of the grant, it is specific to riding positions. And Rick is absolutely right. We're able to calculate those and request those. So that's why we requested the higher amount and we were awarded a lower amount.
Okay, but the lower amount gives us sufficient to replace our current stock. Great. I'm curious, just operation, we get a fill station, like just where is that located? And do all of them have to be brought to that station and then distributed out to all the fire stations?
So one of the great things that we have is at our training facility, we have a larger machine, and that's where this one is going to be housed. We also have a mask service truck that operates out of the school, that when we have a working fire or a working incident where it involves air, maybe hazmat or confined space or some other incident that we respond to, that truck is dispatched to the scene with the spare cylinders. They swap them out, and then when they go back to the school, they take them back and they refill them. Eventually, I would love to have at least 3 of these cascade systems. We call them cascade systems. Would love to have 3 of them throughout the city. But in terms of our immediate need and how we currently operate, it will be sufficient.
Great. And then I guess my final question is just thinking through, like you said, these are at the end of their life cycle. They need to be replaced. There's a new standard, but they hadn't been built into the capital budget to replace them. Like, is this a grant that comes up each year and you we sort of knew it would come up, or was it unexpected it came up and therefore we hadn't put money in the capital budget for, what would we have done if this grant didn't exist and we had to just find money, the bigger sum of money, I guess, just to think
Sure.
if.
Excellent question. So my experience with grants and dealing with the federal government, they are pushed out on need. We knew this was coming up maybe a year or so ago. Rick and I had conversations. We did not want to put it in this year. We didn't want to put it in. We put it in this year. We didn't want to put it in last year. With us not knowing where the standard was going to be, we were going to continue to buy parts until the standard came out, and then we would end up putting it into one of our next budgets. But what I do know about the grant process is if you go and you say, I need air packs for my firefighters, they're at the end of life. Well, how old are they? They're 9.5 years. Your score goes higher. You are almost placed in a priority state because it's reviewed by our peers. You know, there are other firefighters. They don't know what town it is, but they'll look at a grant application and go, wait a minute, their packs are at 9 years, 9.5 years. I think this is going to require some serious consideration. Had it not happened, the standard would be finalized. We would know who the vendors would be, and we would be making a presentation to you. Don't worry, I've got some bigger projects that I'm bringing to you for capital, which may require the use of several different methods. We have an outdated water system. Let's talk about that too. But I'm grateful, and I will pass on. Thank you for speaking of the California firefighters. One of my best friends, Daryl Osby, is the chief of LA County, and they're having a really rough time out there. I'll definitely pass on the wishes, the best wishes and regards from this board. They greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you for answering my questions. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Roth. Any other questions from the committee? I don't see any hands. I don't see any hands. Let me ask something. Chief, is there a trade-in? In other words, what do we do with the old bottles, the old tanks?
There's no trade-in. We can use them for training. We cannot put them on the line once the standard comes out. The NFPA, they're not a regulatory authority. They're consensus standard, but it's like going to court. If you mess up and you know that there's a standard out there and you didn't use it, the liability is there. So we would never put those out on, but we would definitely use them for training, for recruit classes and the like, to the best of our abilities. Yeah. And there may even be a way to donate them. As long as we don't expose the city to any liability, we may be able to donate them to other departments or other organizations that are not bound by NFPA standards and or OSHA or CON-OSHA.
Okay. Another question. Could you explain the cascade system a little bit?
Sure. So what happens is these bottles are filled to about 4,500 to 5,200 PSI. When you take a bottle like that, a cylinder, and you start to add and compress air, even just clean air, it heats up. And so what a cascade system is, there are several cylinders or several stages that are at varying degrees and pressures. They may start out at 1,500 pounds of PSI, then go to 2,500, then go to 3,600, and then go up to 4,500, and so on. So in this filling station, you're able to fill it in stages. And so that's why we say it is a cascade system. It continually steps up the pressure so as not to expand or heat the bottle up too quickly. There have been cases in the past, back when we used the steel tanks, of these tanks exploding and rupturing. Yeah.
All right, and last question I have. Is there an advantage to using air as opposed to oxygen? You mentioned that you made that specific that we use air and not oxygen.
Yes. Well, if you think about it, oxygen, if we lost a mask or we ended up with a leak in a bottle during a fire, oxygen supports combustion. We've had instances where people in nursing homes, unfortunately, were smoking and utilizing their oxygen tanks. And after a certain amount of time, boom or flash, it's expensive to maintain oxygen. Brushed air, compressed air, and filtered air is the best advantage that firefighters have.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Again, any other questions from committee members? All right, seeing none, Then we'll move on to the second item.
And to all the alders, thank you for your support. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, move on to the second item, the port security grant.
So thank you, alders, members of the committee. So this is a port security grant. It supports cameras and vessel maintenance for Marine One, our marine vessel. This is a 75-25 split grant. So Rick, I'll turn it over to you for more details.
Okay, thank you, and thank you again to the committee, and we appreciate you hearing us out. These are again important grants. This happens to be part of sustainability for the cameras that are in and around the Port of New Haven. They provide security and surveillance, and this is these are 3-year grants. They do come out every year. Sometimes we don't know exactly when they're coming out. That does create an issue because it's hard to actually let you know that a grant is in fact coming out before you know it. You have a 25-day window to submit the grants. But again, I think the important thing here is this is a grant that covers not only the cameras but covers Marine One, which is our fireboat, and that boat is one of the busiest vessels on the greater New Haven and out into Norwalk and out over to New London. We are the largest port between Boston and New York. We do have some action, so this boat has really been has been one heck of a resource for us. And I am, certainly always glad to say that all of the funding has been federal funding for this boat. We don't even pay for fuel. The fuel is paid for by the port providers and by the Port Authority, and all of the repairs and any of the anything that needs to be, and I'm talking, we have some large repairs. This boat was a $1.3 million project in 2012, and I think all of you know that those of you who may have owned a boat or heard, boats are like holes in the water. You keep throwing money into them. They do cost a lot of money, but the federal government has provided 100% of the funding. The 25% match, this is a little bit different, as Mr. Jackson said. There's a 25% cost match. So the 25% cost match is over a 3-year period. That cost match is going to be the IT department for infrastructure, and that is literally going to be it's in capital, so nothing has to be moved around. It's capital expense. It stays there. It's at no cost to the operational side of the house, and because they're continually doing upgrades to the Milestone system, which is not only what we use for the port, but we use it for the rest of the city of New Haven, as well as the Board of Education. So this grant just continues to provide, this is going to be maintenance. So if we have a problem, if we contract out with someone, which there'll be an RFP put in place that can go in. If you believe it or not, those cameras being around salt water, you imagine how many times they need to be cleaned. And they also, we've gotten 10 years out of a lot of the cameras, but we have replaced them with upgraded models and also added cameras throughout the area of the port, any of our waterways, and any of the areas that may be flooded due to rising water. So this is, again, it's been for us the funding mechanism through the port security grants has been great. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give Kayla Wallace the opportunity to say some things. Kayla is actually she writes these grants for port security, and if these are not easy. These are these are difficult to write, and also it's difficult to maintain because it's a 3-year period. So you have a grant for 2017, it's good until 2020, and then you get one in 18, and it's good until 2021. So there's constant management. But I think the overall largest objective here is all of that comes at no cost local taxes for the city of New Haven residents. And for example, the fireboat will be redoing the bottom of the boat and actually doing some work on our jet drives. And our cost match there was actually 2 concrete saws that were purchased by the fire department for $2,667. And that's our cost match. So they bought that equipment anyways. And that's really how the government wants to see you, that you're spending the money and keeping it within the departments that are using the asset. So I'm going to pass it over to Kayla. Kayla, do you have anything you want to add? I'm sure you know. I know you work hard on these, and I appreciate what you do.
Sure. Yeah, Kayla Wallace, 20 Alden Street, New Haven, Connecticut. The only thing I'd like to go over is we did originally put in for the contract, because it's a 3-year grant. We put in for what will go out for an RFP for $300,000, with the assumption of using about $100,000 a year for repairs, replacement of cameras. We actually were funded at $281,250 with a local match of $93,750. I just used general numbers that we see coming through IT Capital anyway. So what I planned out for a match would be a firewall is about $33,000 and switches are about $30,000 themselves. So I assumed over 3 years there would be a purchase of a firewall and at least 2 switches that are already pre-planned purchases that IT utilizes all the time. So that's the breakdown there. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Kayla.
Any questions from committee members? Alder Wingate.
Thank you, Chair. It's really not a question. It's, I can wait for deliberations, but the truth of the matter is, like we always like really, really good about what we do. And to me, this is like an awesome public safety thing, right? Like our ports are so important. People don't know how important the ports are. They have the cameras up and keeping us safe on a whole global matter. This is like smart money, right? Like this is smart money matching, right? Like this is the kind of 25% we want to use to keep our place safe, And y'all was so detailed on the last item. It wasn't no need for me to speak. Y'all just keep doing what y'all doing.
Thanks, Alder Wingate. Alder Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for your presentation. Just 2 questions. I'm curious with with the matching money, if it all gets taken, even though it's a 3-year grant, does it all get taken out in 1 year? Or is it spread out over 3 years? And how it's spent?
Yeah, it could wait even till that 3rd year. It's just whenever IT ends up buying it, I will add that towards the match. I've done this for a couple of years now. As Rick said, they're 3-year grants. So I'm still working on a grant from 18 and 17. So as soon as IT buys something of relation to the protection of cameras, I put that towards the match and report that to the federal government.
Okay, thank you. I'm just sort of was thinking out in my mind when they track sort of the spend down of grants, kind of if like the plan is to do it all in 1 year, but that's helpful. My second question, I'm just curious, like who monitors the cameras, and just some examples of what I totally agree that they're so important, but I have no idea who is watching them and what kinds of things we've seen on them.
It's I think I can answer that question. Cameras are more of going back to review something. As you know, that they were significant in ensuring that the Boston bombers were caught. They didn't catch them in the act, but they were able to get them after. But in just maybe a little bit of additional information, the cameras are reviewed, so they're always up every day. They are up in the Emergency Operations Center. They are also being viewed by the desk sergeant at the New Haven Police Department. So all of the cameras are there, and it may be difficult to point out something happening. But if we needed to go back, as you're well aware, we're able to provide, so we be able to get back into the camera system and look back about 20 days. I don't want to say it's all based on how much gets recorded over, but those are that camera footage is typically in the system for approximately 20 days or so. And then they're also on, every police officer has them on their phone. Every public safety agency department head has them on their phone. The United States Coast Guard, we give them access. They are, of course, they provide us with the signature to say that you better provide New Haven with the funding, because this is one heck of an asset to have. There's something going on in the harbor. The captain of the port, or anyone who's who's actually in sector Long Island Sound will pull up those cameras right away. And they are really, they've been a huge, huge resource for us, not just in the port, but they've also been a huge resource and asset for us throughout the city of New Haven.
And also, in addition, in real time, for large scale events, there's nothing like it. We recently, some of you will remember, it was a week or two ago, we had a large scrap metal fire over on Middletown Avenue. And I was at a meeting and I was able to pull it up on the screen, look at it, and phone the chief that was in charge of the fire and say, why don't you try this? So it's invaluable, absolutely invaluable. And we can also use that as a teaching moment as well.
Sure. No, thank you. That's fascinating that everyone has it so accessible. I had no idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alder Roth. Alder Crespo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. It was very informative and valuable. I just wanted to ask, the maintenance of those cameras, are we responsible, or does the grant provide some sort of maintenance allocation, or is that something that the federal government also maintains?
Yeah, it's a great question. This year, for 2020 grant, this is a 3-year maintenance plan. So 100,000, we actually put in 100,000 for maintenance and any replacements that need to occur. But yeah, exactly. So again, the maintenance and repair of the system is also part of the federal government's funding.
Excellent. Thank you, Rick. I appreciate that. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Crespo. I've got a couple. The boat, you mentioned the boat and some work you're going to have done on it, and the grant covers maintenance. What is generally the life of that vehicle?
Well, it's, again, these are rigid aluminum hulls, so they do require some work. Literally, I'll give you this. It should be a 15-year vessel. Could be a little bit longer. Saltwater is not good on vessels. So it's going to be about 15 years. And we have seen other departments who said that their boat, their vessel, or their platform, we call them, has exceeded its life expectancy, and the city or town does not have the funding necessary to replace that. So you then again ask for more money to purchase a new one. But I'm going to say 15 years is a good number. We perform good maintenance on both of them are diesel engines. They are 480 horsepower each. These are jet drive engines, so they don't have a propeller. They have jet drives. They are the safest when you have divers operating around. So God forbid, we're doing a recovery, the police department actually performs that function. They happen to be the safest. And this boat is it drafts about 21 inches of water, and if you hit something with it, you're not hitting the prop. So you have the sustainability of them is greater. But when they break, they're more expensive.
Alder Crespo, to kind of come to the end of the question, I think maybe, Mr. Fontana, this is a 2012 vintage vessel, right? So 15 years plus 2012 is when we have to start to plan about replacement.
We've got a little time.
Yep, the United States Coast Guard does 10 years.
Another question probably for the chief. I have a nephew who's a Boston police officer, and he's on their boat in the Boston Harbor. Now, according to their rules, he has to be certified as a ship captain. Do we have firefighters on our boat, and do they have to be certified as well?
Yes. And so it is based on tonnage and or your response. You could either be called a pilot, certified navigator, or captain of the ship. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we actually have from last year's grant. Well, we actually have approximately just a little bit over 100,000 for training. We do a lot of training. We train anyone needs 40 hours of training before they get behind that wheel. It's called NASBLA, and that NASBLA class is National Boating Laws Administration, and that is a program the only program that is accepted by the United States Coast Guard for rescue for a rescue vessel. Some of our personnel are also captains that we also paid for that as well as part of the grant.
And so we also introduced a program for sustainability. We've introduced the boater safety course into the academy. So when they come out of the academy, they will have the basic operating and safety course, but then the NASBLA teaches them the higher level of training and gets them certified to operate. We also have equipment on there like side sonar that allows us to look below the water. We had an issue where a person was suspected drowning. Normally, we would call off that search at night and not give that family closure. We were able to locate the victim that night, hours after reported being missing. So as we're arranging for you to ride with ALS tomorrow, once we get the boat repairs, the Public Safety Committee, we're going to extend an open invitation for you to go out on the water. Just hope it's not chilly. We can show you what we got, what we have as a city.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Any other questions from committee members?
I accept the invitation.
Have to bring your own life jacket.
Will do.
We got a lot of those.
All right.
3X.
We won't go there. All right, seeing no other questions, I'll move on to the third item, the reimbursement for protective coveralls, etc. Who wants to start?
So this is a reimbursement grant for personal protective equipment, PPE. Obviously, over the last 6 months, we have all learned a whole lot more about PPE than we ever anticipated. But we also, here in the city of New Haven, really got ahead of the curve. And I remember March 13th, which was a Friday, which was my son's birthday, which is why I remember the date, where we just said we need to get ahead of the curve on procuring PPE. And we did, and we've done it successfully. And fortunately, there was a grant opportunity for us to get reimbursed for 90% of certain costs as it pertains to PPE. And so once again, I will turn it over to Mr. Fontana for details.
Thanks, Mr. Jackson. And again, this just happens to be, as Mr. Jackson stated, this is a reimbursement grant. As you know, we have spent, again, I'm sure it's well up over $500,000 and probably well past that. But we were able to identify some of our coveralls, some of our masks, and all of the personal protective equipment that's required as a part of the standard operating procedures to protect firefighters and medical personnel responding on COVID calls. So this grant was basically in the amount of $164,000, and it was just, as we said, a reimbursement of what we had already spent. And the 10% of that, so again, they'd be giving us 90% back. And the match would be what we'd already had spent. So it's really, this is kind of one of those no-brainers. They're just giving you the money. We have not received this grant yet. They are still awarding departments throughout the country. So our fingers are crossed. Again, respiratory protection and eye protection, all of the equipment that is so instrumental in keeping our personnel safe. And I think everyone would agree that one thing you can say about New Haven, they did a hell of a job during COVID. I know that we're not totally past it, but when we were at our peak, New Haven Fire, EMS, PD were second to none. They did not have, it appeared from all of our, the information and reports that we didn't have anybody that got infected providing care, because we had the best equipment that we can have. And as Mr. Jackson said, we got an early start, and I'll give kudos to Chief Vendetto, the Assistant Chief of Operations. We actually started ordering stuff on the last week of February when we had the Yale, when the UN group of folks came to our city, and we had our first person who came down with flu symptoms, and they started purchasing equipment then, and that really saved a lot of folks. So again, this is a reimbursement of those personal protective equipment components, and I don't think there's anything else that we could say about this other than these are wonderful grant opportunities. I will apologize that we don't know when these grants are coming out, and we call them a notice of funding opportunity. But when they come out, we only have a small window to provide the application. And then sometimes the awards come out, within 45 days. And I can tell you that we submitted these back in July. And I know we did put some in during COVID, but there weren't a lot of meetings going on. And I know that there was a question of there being a letter, just submitting a letter saying, hey, we're going to be doing this. Again, I think it's one of our challenges that we find in grant writing. Although these are huge resources and they provide local tax relief, there is not that big window to say, okay, we're putting in for it and we were awarding it and we're accepting it. So I just, I wish there was a better way. We identified that during our transition report, that this has always been very difficult and a challenge to get information over to the alders. It does take a few months to even get the ball rolling. So we understand that. We just have to figure out a way to get it quicker. And if it, hopefully, I know someone said there may be a letter that you can send out to the public safety folks and say, hey, we're going to be putting in for this grant, because there's just not a big window of time. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm sure that if there are any other questions, I'm glad to answer, as well as I'm sure the chief is.
So in terms of timelines, the window can be 30 days, But during COVID, as they're trying to move dollars as rapidly as possible, it's shrinking down to about 20 days. So there's a very small window of time in which we can actually sort of produce the documents necessary to apply for the grant.
Understood. Any other comments, Chief, Kayla?
No, I just wanted to thank and acknowledge my department. Back in February, we played What If. We got all our departments together and we said, what if? What if a firefighter becomes infected with the virus while at home and can't come to work? Or someone in their home becomes infected. What if? What if we lose an entire station? What if we lose an entire shift? We did exercises where we calculated what we would have to do if we lost 25% of our workforce. Would we have to renegotiate the contract and change the schedules? So I want to thank our team, Justin McCarthy, Kenny Oliver. I want to thank the health department as well, because we did have folks that got infected and they assisted us with the process of getting them tested, getting them treated, and getting them back to work. So it was a effort that monumental, obviously, on a grand scale, but it was those early planning days that I have to acknowledge my team, that they went out and researched the type of equipment. New Haven was one of the first departments to get the Aeroclave. This thing ended up, it's an aerosolized disinfecting machine that by the time everyone found out about it, that New Haven had it, it was an 8-week back order. And we had 3 of them in the hopper. So I just want to thank my team and acknowledge them for the tremendous work that they did in terms of getting the city of New Haven to where we had adequate PPE, adequate strategies, and adequate policies in place to protect our folks. So good stuff.
Excellent. It's always nice to be ahead of the curve. And I think generally all of our emergency services are clearly the best in the state. And I venture to challenge them with other departments around the country, both fire and police. Any other questions from committee members? Alder Smith.
Thank you, Sir Chair. Chief Austin, I'm glad you asked that what if question, because that's a question that I have also. What if we don't get these grants? What's the plan after?
I would be sitting in front of you with my hat in my hand, telling you what we needed. We would look for in-kind contributions from institutions. There are all sorts of other areas that we would seek either funding or shared resources from places that were not hit or as affected as we were. But we play what if early on so that we don't find ourselves in those positions. Like I said, we purchased equipment, we did calculations, we did things called a burn rate. No one had ever heard about a burn rate. If you're not in emergency management, you don't know what a burn rate is. A burn rate is to determine what we use on a normal basis, what we use on a most extended basis, maximum output. We determined how many gowns, gloves, masks we would burn within a month, just based on the COVID calls. And we upped that by 25, 30%. So we did our early calculations in terms of making sure that we ordered and purchased the equipment up front before anyone else was looking to make those purchases. And it's not anything against my counterparts throughout the state. Everyone was doing the same thing. But what we realized is that this was going to be a grand pandemic. We have relationships with other departments throughout the world. And when we were hearing the information that this was going to be bad, we erred on the side of caution. But what we did was we utilized resources that we already had. If we had a relationship with Grainger to buy equipment, even if we had accounts at Lowe's and Home Depot. So instead of buying maintenance equipment, Lowe's and Home Depot have Tyvek suits. They have gloves. And so we looked at resources. We make sure that we have to acknowledge Mike Fumiati and Michael Gormany as well in our purchasing departments who guided us through the process of getting it done before it was absolutely necessary and critical where we were behind the 8 ball. And so I'm very proud of the work that the city of New Haven did in terms of this. And we're sitting good in regards to that. And my entire training staff, we turned the entire training school into a logistics depot so that we knew where we were dispensing resources and what we would need. And we monitored that on a regular basis. So we leveraged the technology, leveraged our relationships. So yeah, when we play what if, we're playing what if for keeps.
And if I can add to that, Alder, for COVID testing purposes, we cleaned out an area of the training school. We are going to plant a very large trailer there because we have never stopped. Because our anticipation is that there's going to be something else coming down the bend. And so we need more space for the PPE. And so we're going to drop a very large trailer at the Fire Training Academy for the sole purpose of storing additional PPE so that should something happen in the fall, we have more than adequate supplies to be responsive to that.
Oh, I do appreciate knowing that, and also just to make sure that we're not a burden on taxpayers when we're trying to find, I'm sorry. I said, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we're not a burden on taxpayers when we're trying to find other avenues. If these grants did not come into fruition to where we're not have to figure out where we have to take from Paul to pay Peter. So I'm glad that you do have other plans in place where this wouldn't be a burden on taxpayers. Thank you, Sir Chair.
Thank you, Alder Smith. This last grant is for reimbursement. So can we assume that you bought all this equipment out of a line item already out of your capital budget?
This actually, I believe, when everything was being purchased, was coming out of one COVID account that Mike Gormany set up. So it did come from that, maybe not initially, but everything was moved into that account because we are submitting to FEMA for reimbursement for all of COVID costs, but that actually comes at, generally they reimburse 75% instead of this AFG supplemental, which is 90%. So we thought it was best, everything came out of that one COVID account, but it was best to put this PPE into this grant because it was a higher, a lower match essentially.
Good work. I'd just like to take a second out to recognize Alder Haywood, who's joined us. Good evening. Alder Roth, you had one last question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to remember a few months ago, at one of our hearings, I think there was another COVID grant that was police and fire combined. Maybe I'm misremembering. And so I assume that if we got this grant tonight, it would just enable other things. I'm sure we have lots of needs to be used by the other grant from a few months ago, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes, we actually tried to keep everything separate. So everything that was put in for reimbursement for that grant was not put in for this grant. So they were separate items.
Thank you. Can you just remind me the amount of that grant? I can't remember what that was.
I think that was handled by Sandy at the police department, but I could check with her.
Yeah, no, I can look it up easily enough too. Thank you.
I believe it was between 300 and 500K. Yes, no? I'm not sure because that was also overtime as well.
Thank you.
We'll get you the exact number, but it was much higher than this one.
Yeah, and I really can look it up because I'm sure it was in our documents, but thank you.
All right, any other questions from committee members? Seeing none, that was our last item, and we will move to the public. Any questions from the public? There's no one in the attendees section, but just in case, I'll repeat. Anyone from the public wish to testify on this matter, any of these three matters? Anyone from the public wish to testify on these three matters?
Chair, I'll move that we close the public portion.
Second.
Moved in second. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There are none. We're out of the public session. Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes, I make a motion that we move all three items together.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion on those? Moving all three items together, they're all the same department. We've heard all the testimony, had all the questions that we could come up with.
Mhm.
Any other discussion on it?
I mean, I some of this. Thank you, man. Thank you, Sir Chair. I just think, we have a good group of, we have a great team in the city of New Haven, that really do care about the city and the people of this city. That some of this stuff is like a no-brainer, right? Some of this stuff we going to cross our fingers and do what we got to do. But the truth of the matter is, I just applaud the team, the chief, Ms. Wallace, Rick, Scott. I really just applaud them about the due diligence that they did around these grants. So, trying to keep us safe is a hard job, but as you can see, we really do it. We do it well. So, thank you for all that you do, and I support this. These three items actually.
Wally Crespo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to echo the Vice Chair, and I completely thank, kudos to the fire department and the team, Director Fontana, the Chief Alston, Madam Wallace, and Mr. Jackson for doing a phenomenal job. And I also appreciate the explanation that Director Fontana provided us, given the fact that it may be a short time for them to respond, especially during this pandemic. And then, of course, the explanation from Dr. Jackson that even though they may be 30 days, but it goes down to 20 days and not having an opportunity to send us a notice, hey, just an FYI, we're going to be applying for this. But so I appreciate that explanation. And I just also would like to agree that all three items should be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Wally Crespo. I like to say I really appreciate the fact that this team, the fire chief, the CAO, project manager, and emergency manager, to be able to look ahead and plan for those. Mm-hmm. Looking ahead is one thing, but being right is the other part. So again, you'd always take that good pitch and then swing and miss. But the team has been good. I really appreciate it.
Good stuff.
I feel better living in a city with those type of folks working. Alder Smith.
Yes, I too want to echo every one of my colleagues, knowing that the fire department is a major entity to our city. And I do applaud this team also for the hard work and the diligentness in which have taken to be able to inquire into grants of this magnitude that will make our city much safer and much reliable to have these different parts for the camera system for the ports, which is very, very important to have within our city. And the apparatus, the fire apparatus is one of the major things in which that we do need to help for rescues and to battle the fires that are on. But most importantly, the PPE equipment, which is very, very important to our firefighters, that they have the proper equipment in which that they should have to perform and to be safe being out there. So I do support this, and I thank you guys and ladies for working very hard and diligent. This was a win-win for me also. Thank you.
All right, Alder Singh, we haven't heard too much from you tonight. It's nice to see your hand up.
I want to thank the team for being proactive and pre-planning and looking ahead, especially financially, so our city, wouldn't have to bear this burden, and we could have some of that cost from the federal government. Again, it's we're having a superb team, people that looks ahead, and we can tell from this that they're doing their job. And, you know, I want to thank them for being at the helm there and looking ahead. And thank you for a phenomenal job to the team. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. I think we should move around with the vote. And what I'll do is go around the table. And each person, the motion is to move all three together, moved and seconded. So we'll go around the table. Alder Wingate,
Yes.
Alder Crespo,
D.
Alder Roth,
Yes.
Alder Haywood. I know you're there.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Alder Singh,
Yes.
Alder Smith,
Got in.
and it's a yes from me, so it's a unanimous vote. It will be moved. That sounds like all we have for today then.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed.
Nay.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
All right.
Stay safe.
All the Antones. All the Antones.
Call me.